Marcus Chen wiped the sweat from his forehead as he checked the navigation display one more time. The cargo hauler steadfast groaned under the stress of atmospheric entry, its aging hull plate singing a familiar song of metal fatigue. 3 years of running supplies to the outer rim colonies had taught him to read every vibration, every protest his ship made. This run to Kepler's station should have been routine medical supplies, food concentrates, and replacement parts for the mining equipment. But nothing about this day would prove routine. The distress beacon came through just as he cleared the asteroid field between Kepler Prime and its second moon. Standard emergency frequency. But the signal pattern was wrong. Too complex. Too musical. Marcus had heard alien transmissions before most cargo runners had, but this one made his skin crawl with its desperate, rhythmic pulses. "Computer, analyze that signal," he muttered, adjusting his headset. "Signal appears to be of Zephyrian origin." The ship's AI responded in its typically flat tone. "Pattern suggests extreme distress. Recommend immediate course correction to investigate." Marcus hesitated. The Zephyrians were known throughout human space as a proud, militaristic species. Their empire stretched across 12 star systems, and their technology far exceeded anything humanity had developed. More importantly, they had a strict policy about human interference in their affairs. Getting involved with Zephyrian business was a quick way to end up in an Imperial detention facility, or worse. But the signal kept pulsing, and something about its rhythm reminded him of a heartbeat growing weaker. "Damn," he whispered, banking the steadfast toward the signal's origin. "Computer, record this decision in the log." Marcus Chen, captain and owner of independent cargo vessel Steadfast, responding to alien distress call at coordinates. He rattled off the numbers, knowing they might be the last entry he ever made. The source of the transmission turned out to be a sleek Zephyrian scout ship, its silver hull scarred by weapon impacts. It hung dead in space, venting atmosphere from multiple breaches. As Marcus brought his ship alongside, he could see the elegant curves of Zephyrian design marred by what looked like deliberate sabotage. This wasn't battle damage, this was execution. "Life signs?" he asked the computer, detecting one faint biosignature. "Zephyrian physiology. Estimate 12 minutes of life support remaining in the undamaged sections." Marcus was already moving toward his emergency suit locker before the AI finished speaking. He'd trained for emergency rescues back in his merchant marine days, though he'd never expected to use those skills on an alien. The Zephyrians were supposed to be untouchable, their ships equipped with technology that could outrun or outfight anything humans might encounter. The docking procedure took precious minutes. Zephyrian airlocks used different pressure cycles, different connection protocols. By the time Marcus finally cut through the inner seal with his plasma cutter, his suit's chronometer showed less than 8 minutes remaining for whoever was inside. The ship's interior was a maze of crystalline corridors and organic-looking technology. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows that shifted and danced as Marcus moved deeper into the vessel. The air was thin but breathable, though his suit's sensors detected trace amounts of atmospheric contamination that suggested the life support systems were failing. He found her in what appeared to be a command chamber, slumped over a control surface that pulsed with dying light. Even through his helmet's display, Marcus could see she was unlike any Zephyrian he'd encountered in the few diplomatic meetings he'd witnessed. Most Zephyrians were tall and angular, with pale blue skin and sharp features. This one was smaller, more delicate, with skin that shifted between deep purple and silver depending on the light. Her clothing, if it could be called clothing, seemed to be made of the same crystalline material as the ship's walls, flowing around her form like liquid starlight. More importantly, she was bleeding. The silver substance that served as Zephyrian blood had pooled around her, and Marcus could see multiple wounds across her torso and arms. Someone had tortured her before leaving her to die. "Hey," Marcus said, knowing she probably couldn't understand him. "Can you hear me?" Her eyes, large, violet things that seemed to hold depths Marcus couldn't fathom, fluttered open. When she saw him, those eyes went wide with what might have been fear or surprise. She tried to speak, but only managed a weak sound that his suit's translator couldn't parse. "Don't try to talk," Marcus said, kneeling beside her. "I'm getting you out of here." He'd expected her to be light, but she was heavier than she looked. Not fat, the Zephyrians didn't seem to carry excess weight, but dense. as if her bones were made of something more substantial than calcium. She groaned as he lifted her, and Marcus could feel the warmth of her blood seeping through her damaged clothing. Getting her to his ship was a nightmare of carefully maneuvered movements through cramped passages. Every few meters, she would mumble something in her own language, sometimes reaching out to touch the walls as if saying goodbye. By the time Marcus got her into the Steadfast's medical bay, she'd lost consciousness again. The medical bay wasn't much a basic automated surgical unit designed for human physiology, some emergency medications, and a diagnostic scanner that had seen better years. Marcus had no idea how much of it would work on alien biology, but he had to try. Computer, scan the patient. Use xenobiology protocols. Warning, patient physiology unknown. Recommend immediate transport to properly equipped medical facility. That's not an option right now, Marcus said, cutting away her torn clothing to get a better look at the wounds. Just tell me what you can detect. The scanner hummed and clicked as it worked. Patient appears to be female of the species. Detecting severe trauma to major circulatory vessels. Blood loss approaching critical levels. Cellular regeneration systems appear to be present but functioning at reduced capacity. Marcus looked at the wounds more closely. They were precise, deliberate cuts, made with something extremely sharp. This wasn't the result of an accident, or even a normal fight. Someone had tortured this woman, and they'd known exactly how to hurt her without killing her immediately. Bastards, he muttered, reaching for the surgical kit. He'd never operated on an alien before, but anatomy was anatomy to some degree. The wounds needed to be cleaned and closed. The bleeding needed to be stopped, and whatever alien equivalent of shock she was experiencing needed to be treated. Marcus worked with the focused intensity he'd learned during his military service, ignoring everything except the immediate problem in front of him. The surgical laser sealed the worst of the cuts, though he had to guess at the proper settings for her skin type. The medical bay's emergency blood substitute seemed compatible with her physiology. Her color improved slightly after he got an IV established. Most importantly, her breathing became stronger and more regular. It was only when Marcus finally sat back, exhausted, that he realized what he'd done. He'd just performed emergency surgery on what was obviously a high-ranking Zephyrian. Her clothing, what remained of it, was made of materials that probably cost more than his ship. The few pieces of jewelry she wore were clearly precious, not just valuable, but significant in some cultural way he didn't understand. Computer, any luck identifying our passenger? The AI was quiet for longer than usual. Facial recognition analysis suggests patient matches archived images of Princess Lirelai, third daughter of Empress Valthara of the Zephyrian Empire. Confidence level, 93%. Marcus felt his stomach drop. A princess. Of course she's a princess. He looked down at the sleeping form on the medical table. Princess or not, she was breathing normally now, and her skin had regained some of its natural color-shifting properties. She was probably the most beautiful creature he'd ever seen, alien or otherwise, with delicate features that somehow managed to be both ethereal and strong. Computer, how long until we reach Kepler Station? At current velocity, 18 hours. Any sign of pursuit? Negative. No ships detected on long-range sensors. Marcus nodded, though he wasn't sure if that was good news or bad. If the Zephyrians were looking for their princess, they'd be scanning every ship in the system. If they weren't looking, it meant either they didn't know she was missing, or they didn't care. Neither option seemed particularly promising for his immediate future. He was about to head to the bridge when the princess stirred. Her eyes opened, clearer now than before, and fixed on his face. When she spoke, her voice was melodic despite her obvious pain. You saved me. The words came out in accented but clear standard. Why? Oh, why? Marcus blinked. He hadn't expected her to speak his language. You were dying. I couldn't just leave you there. Marcus, she studied his face as if trying to solve a puzzle. You are human. Your kind does not involve itself in Zephyrian affairs. My kind doesn't usually find Zephyrian princesses bleeding to death in disabled ships, Marcus replied. What happened to you? Her expression darkened, and for a moment, Marcus glimpsed something hard and angry beneath her delicate exterior. My cousin, Prince Valdris, believes he has a better claim to the throne than my brother. He thought removing me would weaken our family's position. He tried to kill you? He tried to make me suffer first, she said, touching one of the bandaged wounds on her arm. Valdris enjoys causing pain. But he underestimated how long it would take for my security detail to find me. I escaped before he could finish what he started. Marcus frowned. What about your guards? Your ship's crew? Dead. The word came out flat and final. Valdris made sure I watched. He wanted me to know the price of defying him. The way she said it, with such controlled emotion, made Marcus's chest tighten. He'd seen enough violence during his military service to recognize the look of someone trying to hold themselves together after trauma. I'm sorry. Do not apologize for my cousin's actions, she said, struggling to sit up. Marcus moved to help her, and she didn't pull away from his touch. You have done something remarkable, human. You have saved the life of a Zephyrian royal, without thought of reward or consequence. Such actions are unprecedented. Marcus, he said. My name is Marcus Chen. Marcus Chen, she repeated, as if testing how the syllables felt. I am Princess Lirelei, though I suppose my title means little while I am bleeding on your medical table. It means you're under my protection until we reach Kepler Station, Marcus said. After that, we'll figure out how to get you home safely. She tilted her head, studying him again. You would do this? Even knowing the danger it puts you in? Your cousin already tried to kill you once. Leaving you alone would just give him another chance. For the first time since he'd found her, Princess Lirelei smiled. It was a small expression, barely there, but it transformed her entire face. You are either very brave or very foolish, Marcus Chen. Probably both, Marcus admitted. But we can worry about that later. Right now, you need to rest and heal. She nodded, settling back onto the medical table. I will remember what you have done. When I return to the Imperial Court, I will ensure you are properly rewarded. Marcus was about to tell her that wasn't necessary when the ship's proximity alarms began screaming. He rushed to the nearest display panel, his heart sinking as he saw what the sensors had detected. 3 Zephyrian battlecruisers had just dropped out of faster-than-light travel, their weapon systems already charging. Princess, Marcus called over the alarm. I think your cousin found us. She sat up despite her injuries, her face going pale. Impossible. The ship's tracking systems were destroyed. Then how? Marcus stopped, a terrible possibility occurring to him. The distress beacon. It wasn't just calling for help. It was broadcasting your location. Lirelei's eyes went wide with understanding and horror. Valdris knew I would try to escape. He wanted someone to find me, to save me. He's been watching, waiting for the right moment. The right moment for what? Before she could answer, the communications system crackled to life. A voice spoke in Zephyrian, harsh and commanding. Marcus couldn't understand the words, but the tone made his skin crawl. He says you are to surrender immediately, Lirelei translated, her voice barely a whisper. He promises your death will be quick if you comply. If you resist. She closed her eyes. He will make it last for days. Marcus looked at the tactical display. 3 battlecruisers against a cargo hauler. It wasn't even a contest. His ship had no weapons, minimal armor, and engines that were already pushed to their limits. Even if he'd been flying a military vessel, the odds would have been hopeless. But as he looked at the princess, saw the fear and desperation in her violet eyes, Marcus knew he couldn't simply surrender. She'd already been tortured once. Whatever Valdris had planned for her, and for him, would be worse than a quick death. Computer, he said quietly. How long until we reach the gravity well of Kepler Prime? 47 minutes at maximum acceleration. And how long can our shields hold against Zephyrian weapons? Current shield configuration will fail after approximately 12 seconds of concentrated fire. Marcus nodded grimly. 12 seconds wasn't much, but it might be enough. Princess, can your people track us through faster-than-light travel? Not if we stay within a planetary gravity well, she said, understanding immediately. But Marcus, even if we reach Kepler Prime, We cannot hide forever. Valdris will, one problem at a time. Marcus interrupted, his hands flying over the navigation controls. Computer. Plot a course for Kepler Prime. Maximum acceleration. Route us through the asteroid field. Warning. Course plotted through hazardous space. Recommend. Override safety protocols. Plot the course. The Steadfast shuddered as its engines pushed beyond their normal limits. Through the viewports, Marcus could see the Zephyrian ships responding, their sleek forms moving to intercept. Energy weapons began charging, creating an eerie glow along their hulls. They're trying to disable us, not destroy us, Lirelei observed, watching the tactical display. Valdris wants us alive. Good, Marcus said, adjusting their course to take them deeper into the asteroid field. That gives us an advantage. The first energy bolts lanced past the cargo hauler, close enough to make the hull ring like a struck bell. Marcus threw the ship into a spiraling dive between two massive asteroids, using their bulk to block the next volley. Behind them, the Zephyrian ships moved with predatory grace, but they were having trouble matching the Steadfast's erratic movement through the dense field. You are insane, Lirelei said, but there was admiration in her voice rather than fear. Sanity is overrated, Marcus replied, threading the needle between two tumbling rocks the size of skyscrapers. Besides, I've got cargo to deliver. For 30 minutes, they played a deadly game of cat and mouse through the asteroid field. The Steadfast was smaller and more maneuverable than the battlecruisers, but it was also much more fragile. Every near miss from the Zephyrian weapons sent shockwaves through the hull, and Marcus could hear systems beginning to fail throughout the ship. But they were getting closer to Kepler Prime, and the gravity well that would prevent faster-than-light pursuit. They almost made it. The trap was perfectly executed. While two of the cruisers had been herding the cargo hauler through the asteroids, the third had been moving ahead, positioning itself at the edge of the gravity well. When the Steadfast finally broke free of the asteroid field, it flew directly into the waiting ship's weapons range. The energy beam that struck them was precisely calibrated. It overloaded the ship's main power grid without destroying the hull, leaving the Steadfast drifting helplessly as the Zephyrian ships closed in. Emergency power flickered on, casting everything in red light. Marcus tried the engines, but they were completely dead. Life support was failing. In the medical bay, Princess Lirelei was struggling to stand despite her injuries. I'm sorry, Marcus said as the first Zephyrian boarding pod attached itself to his ship's hull. I should have been able to get you to safety. She looked at him with those deep violet eyes, and Marcus saw something there that surprised him. Not fear or anger, but determination. You shed your blood for me, she said quietly. You risked everything to save someone you had never met. Such actions create debts that cannot easily be repaid. Before Marcus could ask what she meant, the airlock exploded inward. Zephyrian soldiers in powered armor poured through, their weapons trained on both humans. Behind them came a figure that made Princess Lirelei's face harden with hatred. Prince Valdris was tall even by Zephyrian standards, with skin so pale it was almost white, and eyes like chips of black ice. His armor was ornate, decorated with symbols that probably indicated his rank and family connections. When he saw Lirelei, his thin lips curved in a smile that made Marcus want to reach for a weapon he didn't have. Cousin, Valdris said in perfect standard, his voice cultured and cold. You have led us quite a chase. And you, human, have interfered in matters far beyond your comprehension. Marcus stepped between Valdris and the princess, knowing it was futile but unable to stop himself. She's under my protection. Valdris laughed, a sound like breaking glass. How wonderfully primitive. Do you know what you have done, cargo hauler? You have saved the life of someone whose death would have prevented a war. Because of your misguided heroism, thousands will die in the conflicts to come. Then maybe you should reconsider your coup attempt, Marcus said. Oh, I have no intention of stopping, Valdris replied. But now I have something even better than my cousin's death. I have a human who willingly shed blood for Zephyrian royalty. Do you know what that means in our culture, princess? Lirelei's face had gone pale, but her voice was steady. Valdris, you cannot. I can and I will, the prince interrupted. By ancient law, this human has bound himself to our family through his actions. He belongs to us now. And more specifically, his smile grew wider and more cruel. He belongs to our mother. The Empress will be very interested to meet the alien who thinks himself worthy of royal blood debt. As Valdris's soldiers moved to secure both prisoners, Marcus caught a glimpse of Princess Liralei's expression. She was looking at him with something that might have been pity, and when she spoke, her voice was barely audible. I tried to warn you, she whispered. Actions have consequences among my people. You saved my life. And now, she closed her eyes. Now you belong to the crown, forever. The Zephyrian Imperial Palace was unlike anything Marcus had ever imagined. Built into the side of a mountain that scraped the edge of space, its crystalline spires caught and reflected the light of 3 different suns. As the prisoner transport approached the main landing platform, Marcus could see gardens that defied physics, floating islands of vegetation that rotated slowly in perfect formation, connected by bridges of what looked like solid light. The journey from his captured ship had taken 6 days, and Marcus had spent most of it in a cell that was luxurious by human standards but apparently considered basic accommodation by the Zephyrians. The walls could change color and opacity at will. The furniture adjusted itself to his body automatically. And the food, while alien, had been surprisingly palatable. Princess Lirelei had been kept in different quarters, and Marcus had only seen her twice during the journey. Both times, she had looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read, guilt, perhaps, or regret. But also, something else, determination, maybe, or resolve. Prince Valdris had made it clear that Marcus was not to be harmed during transport. The Empress will want to examine her new acquisition personally, he'd said with that cruel smile. She has very particular ideas about how humans should be treated. Now, as guards in ceremonial armor escorted him through corridors that seemed to shift and change when he wasn't looking directly at them, Marcus tried to prepare himself for whatever was coming. The guards hadn't spoken to him, but their body language suggested they were as uncomfortable with this situation as he was. The throne room was vast beyond comprehension. The ceiling stretched so high it disappeared into a misty haze, and the walls were covered in moving murals that seemed to tell the story of Zephyrian civilization. At the far end of the room, on a throne that appeared to be carved from a single massive crystal, sat the most intimidating being Marcus had ever encountered. Empress Valthara was ancient by any standard he could measure. Her skin had the translucent quality of old ice, and her eyes held depths that spoke of centuries of accumulated power. She was tall, even sitting down, and her clothing, if it could be called clothing, seemed to be made of captured starlight and shadow. Around her head floated a crown of crystalline fragments that moved in complex patterns, occasionally chiming with sounds like distant bells. Prince Valdris knelt at the base of the throne, and Marcus was pushed to his knees beside him. Princess Lirelei was already there, but she remained standing despite the obvious disapproval of the guards. The Empress studied all 3 of them for a long moment before speaking. So, she said, her voice carrying easily across the massive space, despite being barely above a whisper. This is the human who has complicated our family politics. Marcus looked up at her, meeting her gaze despite the instinctive fear that made his hands shake. Your Majesty, I was only trying to help your daughter. The Empress tilted her head, and Marcus caught a glimpse of what might have been amusement in her ancient eyes. You speak to me directly. Interesting. Most humans grovel when brought before me. Most humans probably have more sense than I do, Marcus admitted. This time, the amusement was unmistakable. A sound that might have been laughter echoed through the throne room, though it came from the Empress's throat rather than her lips. Indeed. Tell me, human Marcus Chen, do you understand what you have done? Do you comprehend the laws you have invoked through your actions? Marcus glanced at Princess Lirelei, who gave him the slightest shake of her head. I saved someone who was dying. I didn't know I was invoking any laws. Ignorance is not an excuse when dealing with matters of royal blood, Prince Valdris interjected. The human should silence. The word from the Empress was quiet, but it carried such authority that Valdris immediately stopped talking. "I was not addressing you, nephew." She turned her attention back to Marcus. "You shed your own blood in the process of saving my daughter's life. Your ship's medical records show you injured yourself during the rescue and surgery. Is this correct?" Marcus nodded. He'd cut his hand on some debris while carrying the princess to his ship, and had nicked himself with the surgical laser while working on her wounds. Minor injuries, but he'd bled for them. "Then you have invoked the law of blood debt," the Empress continued. "By our most ancient traditions, you have bound yourself to our family through sacrifice. You belong to us now, human. More specifically, you belong to me." "Mother," Princess Lirelei said, stepping forward. "He didn't know." "What he knew is irrelevant," the Empress replied, though her tone remained gentle. "The law is clear. He shed blood for royal life. The debt must be acknowledged." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. "What does that mean exactly?" "This blood debt?" The Empress studied him for another long moment. "It means you are mine. Human. Your life. Your freedom. Your future. All of it belongs to the crown. You will serve until the debt is repaid, or until death releases you from your obligation." "And how long does it usually take to repay a blood debt?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "There is no precedent," the Empress said. "No outsider has ever invoked this law before. The blood debt you have created is unprecedented." Prince Valdris smiled coldly. "Which means it can never be repaid. The human will serve as a slave until he dies." The Empress turned that terrible gaze on her nephew, and Marcus saw Valdris actually flinch. "You seem pleased by this development. Why?" "The human interfered with my plans," Valdris said. "It is fitting that he should suffer for his presumption." "Your plans," the Empress repeated. "You mean your attempt to murder my daughter and destabilize the succession?" The throne room fell silent, except for the distant chiming of the Empress's crown. Valdris opened his mouth, then closed it again, apparently realizing he'd walked into a trap. "Did you think I was unaware of your activities, nephew?" The Empress continued. "Did you believe I would not notice when you began gathering support among the outer system governors? When you started spreading rumors about Lirelei's fitness to inherit?" "I was acting in the best interests of the Empire," Valdris said, but his voice had lost its earlier confidence. "You were acting in the best interests of your own ambition," the Empress corrected. "And your actions led directly to this situation. If you had not tried to kill my daughter, this human would never have had cause to save her. The blood debt exists because of your choices, Valdris." Marcus watched this exchange with growing fascination. The Empress was clearly using his situation to maneuver against her nephew, but he couldn't tell what her ultimate goal might be. "However," the Empress said, turning back to Marcus, "the debt exists, regardless of how it came to pass. You belong to me now, human, and I must decide what to do with you." "I don't suppose I could just pay you money and go home?" Marcus asked. The Empress made that laughing sound again. "You continue to surprise me." "No. Human. Money cannot discharge a blood debt. Only service, sacrifice, or death can end your obligation." "Then I guess I'm at your mercy, Your Majesty." "Yes," the Empress agreed. "You are. But tell me, what service do you believe you could provide to the Zephyrian Empire? You are a cargo hauler, a merchant of no particular skill or distinction. What use could I possibly have for you?" Marcus thought about that. What could a human offer to beings who had technology centuries beyond anything his species had developed? What skills did he possess that might be valuable to an interstellar empire? "I don't know," he said honestly, "but I'm willing to learn whatever you need me to learn. I'm good with ships, good with people from different cultures. I pick up new skills pretty quickly." "Adequate but uninspiring," the Empress said. "Princess Lirelei, what would you suggest I do with your rescuer?" Lirelei stepped forward, and Marcus could see the tension in her posture. "Mother, he saved my life at great risk to his own. Surely that should count for something." "It counts for everything," the Empress replied. That is why he belongs to us now. But belonging and being useful are different things. She stood from her throne, and Marcus was struck again by her imposing presence. Even among a species known for their height, she was unusually tall, and power seemed to radiate from her like heat from a star. I have decided, she announced. Marcus Chen of Earth. You will serve as my personal attendant. You will remain in the palace. You will accompany me to state functions, and you will provide whatever services I require. In return, you will be housed, fed, and clothed appropriately for your station. Marcus blinked. Your personal attendant? Is there a problem with this arrangement? The Empress asked, her tone dangerous. No, Your Majesty. I don't know what a personal attendant does. You will learn, she said simply. Guards, escort him to the servants' quarters. He will begin his duties tomorrow. As the guards moved to flank him, Marcus looked back at Princess Lirelei. She was watching him with those deep violet eyes, and he thought he saw an apology in her expression. Or maybe it was something else entirely. The servants' quarters turned out to be a complex of rooms deep within the palace, connected by corridors that seemed to have been grown rather than built. Marcus's assigned chamber was larger than his cabin aboard the Steadfast, with walls that could display views of space, forest, or ocean depending on his mood. The furniture was comfortable. The facilities were luxurious by human standards, and everything was controlled by touching panels that responded to thought as much as physical contact. His fellow servants were a mix of species Marcus had never encountered before. There was Keth, a being that looked like a cross between a praying mantis and a tree, who served as the palace's head gardener. There was Yira, whose species seemed to be made of living metal, who maintained the palace's technological systems. And there was Jolan, who appeared human except for the gill slits along his neck and the fact that his skin changed color with his emotions. So you're the human who invoked blood debt, Jolan said when Marcus was introduced to the group. That's either very brave or very stupid. I'm still trying to figure out which, Marcus admitted. Both, probably, said Keth, his voice like wind through leaves. The Empress doesn't usually take personal attendants. The last one was released from service 50 years ago. Released how? Marcus asked. He died of old age, Yira chimed in, her voice ringing like struck metal. Served faithfully for 80 years, died peacefully in his sleep. The Empress attended his funeral personally. Marcus did the math and felt his heart sink. If the previous attendant had served for 80 years, and if Marcus was going to be stuck in this position until the blood debt was repaid. I see you're beginning to understand your situation, Jalan observed, his skin shifting to a sympathetic blue-green. Don't despair completely. The Empress is demanding but fair. Serve her well, and you'll be treated well. And if I don't serve her well? The other servants exchanged glances. Let's just say that's not recommended, Keth said finally. Marcus spent his first night in the palace staring at the ceiling, which displayed a slowly shifting pattern of stars that was either real-time or a very sophisticated simulation. He thought about his ship, probably impounded somewhere in the Imperial Fleet yards. He thought about the cargo delivery he'd never completed, and the reputation damage that would come from his mysterious disappearance. He thought about Earth, and whether he'd ever see it again. Most of all, he thought about Princess Lirelei, and the look in her eyes when the Empress had pronounced his sentence. His duties began the next morning with a detailed briefing from the palace's head of staff. A being called Thrace, who looked like a humanoid dragon and spoke in precise, clipped sentences. The Empress rises at the third bell, Thrace explained as they walked through corridors lined with portraits of previous rulers. You will be present in her private chambers to assist with her morning preparations. You will accompany her to all meals, all meetings, all state functions. You will remain within 10 paces of her at all times, unless specifically dismissed. You will speak only when spoken to, and you will anticipate her needs without being asked. How am I supposed to anticipate needs I don't understand? Marcus asked. Thrace stopped walking and fixed him with a stare that could have melted steel. You will learn. Quickly. The Empress does not tolerate incompetence. Marcus's first day was a disaster. He couldn't figure out how to operate the Empress's personal transport pod, nearly spilled her morning beverage on her ceremonial robes, and accidentally activated a security protocol that locked down an entire wing of the palace. By evening, he was convinced he'd be dead before the week was out. But the Empress surprised him. When Thrace began to deliver what sounded like a scathing report of Marcus's failures, she held up one hand for silence. "He is learning," she said simply. "Continue his training." The second day was marginally better. Marcus managed to avoid any major catastrophes, though he still struggled with the technology and the complex etiquette of the imperial court. The Empress said nothing about his performance, but she also didn't have him executed, which Marcus took as a positive sign. It was on the third day that he began to understand why the Empress had chosen him for this role. They were in the throne room for a formal audience with ambassadors from the outer systems, when one of the delegates, a species Marcus didn't recognize, began speaking in increasingly agitated tones. The translation devices were having trouble keeping up, and the meaning of the conversation was getting lost in technical jargon and cultural references. Without thinking, Marcus stepped forward slightly. "Your Majesty, if I may, the ambassador seems to be concerned about shipping routes through the Vega Nebula. He's worried that the new trade agreements will force his people to use longer or more expensive routes." The Empress looked at him with those ancient eyes. "And you understand this how?" "I've run cargo through that region," Marcus explained. "The standard routes are efficient, but they require very specific permits and timing. If those agreements change the permit structure..." "Continue," the Empress said. Marcus addressed the ambassador directly, using the basic trade language most cargo haulers picked up. Within minutes, he'd clarified the concerns and suggested several alternative solutions. The ambassador's mood improved noticeably, and the rest of the audience proceeded smoothly. Afterward, as they walked back to the Empress's private chambers, she spoke without looking at him. "You understand trade in ways my other advisors do not. I've been hauling cargo for years, Your Majesty. You pick up a lot of practical knowledge about how commerce actually works." "Indeed." She was quiet for a moment. "Tell me, human, what do you think of Prince Valdris's political theories?" Marcus hesitated. This felt like dangerous ground. "I try not to get involved in politics, Your Majesty." "That is not what I asked." Marcus took a deep breath. "From what I've seen, the prince seems more interested in power than in actually governing. He talks about what's best for the empire, but his actions suggest he's mainly concerned with what's best for him." "An astute observation," the Empress said. "And what do you think should be done about such a person?" "That's not my decision to make, Your Majesty." "No," the Empress agreed. "It is mine. But your perspective is useful." As the days turned into weeks, Marcus began to understand the true nature of his position. He wasn't just a servant or a curiosity. The Empress was using him as a resource, a way to understand how her policies and decisions would affect the ordinary beings who made up the vast majority of her empire. His practical knowledge of trade, shipping, and interspecies relations provided her with insights her traditional advisors couldn't offer. More importantly, he was completely outside the complex web of family politics and imperial intrigue that dominated the court. He had no agenda beyond survival, no family connections to protect, no political ambitions to advance. This made him uniquely valuable as a sounding board and advisor. Princess Lirali visited him occasionally, always under the pretext of checking on his adjustment to palace life. During these visits, she seemed to be studying him as carefully as her mother did, though for different reasons. "Are you well, Marcus?" she asked during one such visit, as they walked through one of the floating gardens. "I'm alive, Your Highness." "That's more than I expected after the first few days. My mother is pleased with your service." "I'm glad to hear it." Lirale stopped walking and turned to face him. "You realize what she's doing, don't you? Why she really chose this role for you?" Marcus nodded. "She's using me as a bridge to understand how normal people think. I provide a perspective she can't get from her usual advisors." "It's more than that," Lirale said. "She's testing you, evaluating you. Mother doesn't make permanent decisions about people quickly, but when she does... When she does... What? When she does, Those people tend to become very important to her, Lirelei said. The previous attendant wasn't just a servant, Marcus. By the time he died, he was one of her most trusted counselors. His advice shaped imperial policy for decades. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the garden's carefully controlled climate. Are you saying she's grooming me for something? I'm saying you've impressed her more in a few weeks than most beings do in years, Lirelei replied. That can be a good thing, or a very dangerous thing, depending on how you handle it. Before Marcus could ask what she meant by that, Thrace appeared with a message that the Empress required his immediate presence. As he hurried back toward the palace proper, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that his life was about to become even more complicated than it already was. The Empress was waiting for him in her private study, a chamber filled with artifacts from across the galaxy. She was examining what looked like a holographic map of the Empire, with various systems highlighted in different colors. Ah, Marcus, come here. I want your opinion on something. Marcus approached carefully, still not entirely comfortable with the casual way she'd begun addressing him. Yes, Your Majesty. These systems, she said, gesturing to several highlighted regions. They're experiencing civil unrest, pirates, rebel activity, general lawlessness. My military advisors recommend a strong response. Overwhelming force to restore order. Marcus studied the map. Several of the highlighted systems were ones he'd visited during his cargo runs. What kind of unrest? Exactly? Various forms: attacks on merchant shipping, refusal to pay imperial taxes, declarations of independence. If I may ask, Your Majesty, what's causing the unrest? People don't usually rebel without reason. The Empress looked at him sharply. You think my rule provides justification for rebellion? No, Your Majesty, Marcus said carefully. But in my experience, when you have widespread problems across multiple systems, there's usually an underlying cause, something that's affecting all of them the same way. Explain. Marcus pointed to the highlighted systems. These are all Outer Rim territories, long shipping routes, expensive to maintain imperial presence, economies that depend heavily on trade with non-imperial systems. If something changed recently, new tax policies, shipping regulations, trade restrictions that could explain why they're all having problems at the same time. The Empress was quiet for a long moment, studying both the map and Marcus's face. You believe the solution is policy changes rather than military action? I think you need to understand the root cause before you decide on a solution, Marcus said. Military action might stop the symptoms, but if the underlying problem remains, the unrest will simply resurface elsewhere, the Empress finished. Interesting. My advisors seem to believe that overwhelming force is the answer to most problems. Force has its place, Marcus agreed. But sometimes the most effective solution is the one that addresses why people are angry in the first place. The Empress deactivated the holographic display and turned to face him fully. You continue to surprise me, human. Your perspective is refreshing. Thank you, Your Majesty. Tell me, she said. And Marcus caught something in her tone that made him suddenly alert. If I were to grant you a position of greater responsibility, would you accept it? Marcus felt his mouth go dry. I serve at your pleasure, Your Majesty. That is not an answer. He took a deep breath. If you believe I can serve the Empire better in a different capacity, then yes, I would accept. The Empress smiled. And for the first time since he'd met her, the expression seemed genuinely warm. Good. Because I have need of someone who can think beyond traditional solutions. Someone who understands how policies affect the beings they govern. Someone who has no agenda beyond service to the crown. What did you have in mind, Your Majesty? That, the Empress said, will depend on how you handle your next assignment. But first, we must deal with Prince Valdris. His patience with your continued existence is wearing thin, and I suspect he will make a move against you soon. Marcus felt ice form in his stomach. What kind of move? The kind that could be very dangerous for you, the Empress replied. But also the kind that might provide us with an opportunity to resolve our family's political difficulties once and for all. As she explained what she had in mind, Marcus realized that his situation was about to become far more complex and far more perilous than he had imagined. The attack came 3 days later, during the Festival of Three Suns, when the palace was filled with visiting dignitaries, and the security protocols were stretched thin by the sheer number of guests. Marcus was accompanying the Empress to a formal reception in the Hall of Stars when the lights suddenly died. Emergency illumination activated immediately, casting everything in an eerie red glow. But the brief moment of darkness had been enough. When Marcus's eyes adjusted, he saw figures in black armor moving through the crowd with lethal precision. Not Zephyrian soldiers, these were mercenaries, probably hired from outside the Empire. "Stay close to me," the Empress commanded. But her voice was calm, despite the chaos erupting around them. Palace guards were responding to the threat, but the attackers seemed to know exactly where to strike for maximum effect. Marcus saw the trap immediately. "Your Majesty, this isn't random. They're herding us toward the East Wing." "I concur," she replied, drawing a weapon that looked like crystallized lightning, which means someone with detailed knowledge of palace security is coordinating this attack. As if summoned by her words, Prince Valdris appeared at the far end of the hall, flanked by more black-armored figures. He was no longer wearing the ceremonial robes of a royal family member. Instead, he was dressed in military gear that looked distinctly non-Zephyrian. "Aunt Valthara," he called across the chaos, his voice carrying despite the sounds of battle. "I had hoped to avoid public confrontation, but you forced my hand by elevating that human beyond his proper station." The Empress raised her weapon but didn't fire. "You would stage a coup during a religious festival? In front of foreign ambassadors?" "I stage a revolution during the perfect moment," Valdris corrected. "When your weaknesses are on full display, your attachment to inferior species, your willingness to place alien interests above those of your own people. These failures have cost you the support of the outer systems." Marcus looked around the hall, taking in the tactical situation. The attackers had indeed been herding them, but not just toward the East Wing. They were being pushed toward a specific location, a section of the hall where the walls were thinner, where an explosion could bring down a significant portion of the structure. "He's not trying to capture us," Marcus said quietly to the Empress. "He's planning to kill us both and make it look like we died together defending against foreign attack. Blame the violence on outside agitators." "Clever," the Empress murmured. "And it would work if we allowed ourselves to be positioned where he wants us." But they were running out of room to maneuver. The attackers were well-trained and well-coordinated, and they'd clearly studied the palace's layout extensively. Within minutes, Marcus and the Empress found themselves backed against the very wall section he'd identified as the target zone. "Surrender the human," Valdris called out, moving closer with his guards. "He is the source of this conflict. Give him to me, and I will allow you to live under house arrest. Of course, while the Imperial Council considers your abdication." "An interesting proposal," the Empress replied. "But I'm afraid I must decline." Valdris smiled coldly. "Then you die together. How romantic." That's when Marcus realized something that made his blood run cold. The other guests, the foreign ambassadors and dignitaries, weren't fleeing randomly. They were being evacuated in a specific pattern, moved to positions where they would have a clear view of what was about to happen. Valdris wanted witnesses. He wanted the galaxy to see the Empress die defending a human. "Your Majesty," Marcus said urgently, "he's not just planning a coup. He's planning a propaganda victory. If you die protecting me, it proves his point about your priorities being wrong." The Empress glanced at him, and Marcus saw understanding dawn in her ancient eyes. "But if I sacrifice you to save myself, you look weak, and he still kills you anyway," Marcus finished. "It's a perfect trap." "Indeed it is," she agreed. "Do you have any suggestions for escaping this perfect trap?" Marcus looked around the hall one more time, his mind racing. The attackers, the positioning, the witnesses, the timing, all of it was designed to force the Empress into an impossible choice. But Valdris had made one critical error. He'd focused so intently on Zephyrian politics and psychology that he'd forgotten he was dealing with a human. "Actually, yes," Marcus said, "but you're not going to like it." Before the Empress could ask what he meant, Marcus stepped away from her and raised his voice so it would carry across the entire hall. "Prince Valdris," he called out. "You want me?" Fine. But let's do this properly. The prince paused, clearly not expecting this development. What are you babbling about, human? I invoke the right of challenge, Marcus said, hoping he was remembering the Zephyrian legal traditions correctly. Single combat. Winner takes all. The hall fell silent except for the sound of distant alarms. Even the attackers seemed confused by this development. Valdris stared at Marcus, as if he'd grown a second head. You cannot invoke, he began. Actually, he can, the Empress interjected, and Marcus could hear amusement in her voice. As one bound to the royal family through blood debt, he has the right to defend the family's honor through single combat. An ancient law, rarely invoked, but still valid. Valdris's face went through several color changes as he worked through the implications. The human has no training, no weapons, no. The challenged party chooses the terms of combat, Marcus said, still hoping his understanding of Zephyrian law was accurate. Isn't that right, Your Majesty? Quite right, she confirmed. What terms do you choose, human? This was the moment Marcus had been building toward. No weapons. No armor. Just intelligence and skill. Let Prince Valdris prove he can outthink an inferior human. The crowd murmured at this. Marcus was essentially challenging Valdris to a battle of wits, something that would be impossible to refuse without looking weak in front of the assembled dignitaries. This is ridiculous, Valdris snarled. I will not. You will not fight an unarmed human in a contest of intelligence? One of the foreign ambassadors called out. How? Interesting. The trap was perfect. And Valdris knew it. If he refused, he looked like a coward. If he accepted and lost, he looked like a fool. But if he accepted and won, he could claim he'd defeated the human in fair combat, which would give his coup attempt additional legitimacy. Very well, Valdris said after a long pause. What form will this contest take? Marcus looked around the hall, his eyes settling on the holographic display system that had been showing star charts during the reception. A problem-solving challenge. You claim the outer systems are rebelling because of the Empress's policies. I claim they're rebelling because of economic and social pressures that could be addressed through better governance. We each present our analysis and solution. The assembled ambassadors vote on which approach is more likely to succeed. And the stakes? If you win, I submit to whatever punishment you choose, Marcus said. If I win, you abandon your coup attempt and submit to the Empress's judgment. Valdris considered this. From his perspective, it was an excellent deal. He was a trained politician and strategist going up against a cargo hauler. The outcome should be obvious. Agreed, he said. The next hour was the longest of Marcus's life. Working at the holographic display, he pulled up data on the rebellious systems, trade routes, economic indicators, and population statistics. The assembled crowd watched in fascination as he built his case, layer by layer. The outer systems are rebelling because they're being economically strangled, he explained, highlighting shipping routes and trade data. Look at these patterns. New imperial regulations have increased transportation costs by 30%, while simultaneously reducing access to non-imperial markets. The result is economic depression across all outer systems. He switched to population data. At the same time, these systems are experiencing rapid growth as refugees flee conflicts in neighboring regions. More people, fewer resources, limited economic opportunities. That's a recipe for civil unrest. Prince Valdris presented his counter-argument with polished skill. The outer systems were rebelling because the empire had become weak, he claimed. The Empress's policies of tolerance and inclusion had encouraged dissent. What was needed was a strong hand, clear authority, and the willingness to use military force to maintain order. It was a compelling argument, delivered with the practiced ease of someone who'd been preparing for this moment for years. When Valdris finished, Marcus could see several of the ambassadors nodding thoughtfully. Then Marcus began his rebuttal. And everything changed. Prince Valdris is absolutely right about one thing, he said. The empire has become weak, but not in the way he thinks. He pulled up a new set of data: imperial military deployment, resource allocation, administrative efficiency ratings. Look at these numbers. The empire is spending more on military suppression of civil unrest than on the economic development that would prevent unrest in the first place. It's using its strength in exactly the wrong way. Marcus highlighted specific examples. System after system. The pattern is the same. Economic problems lead to protests. Protests lead to military intervention. Military intervention leads to more economic problems. The empire is trapped in a cycle of escalating force that solves nothing and costs everything. He turned to address the assembled ambassadors directly. You represent systems and species that have thrived through cooperation, trade, and mutual benefit. You know that lasting stability comes from prosperity, not from fear. Prince Valdris is offering you an empire built on military dominance and constant suppression. I'm suggesting an alternative. The alternative Marcus outlined was elegant in its simplicity. Instead of increasing military pressure on the outer systems, reduce trade barriers and transportation costs. Instead of punishing rebellion, address the economic conditions that caused it. Instead of ruling through fear, rule through mutual benefit. The Empress's policies aren't too soft, Marcus concluded. They're just not being implemented intelligently. Give the outer systems a reason to want to remain part of the empire. And they will. Give them only reasons to rebel, and they'll keep rebelling no matter how many troops you send. When he finished, the hall was silent for a long moment. Then, the ambassador from the Centauri Federation stood up. I have seen both approaches in action, she said. The human's analysis matches my own experience. Economic pressure creates political instability. Economic opportunity creates political stability. I vote for the human's proposal. One by one, the other ambassadors stood and voiced their opinions. The vote wasn't even close. Marcus's approach won by a margin of nearly 3-1. Prince Valdris stood in stunned silence as the results became clear. He'd been outmaneuvered by a cargo hauler, in front of representatives from across the galaxy. His carefully planned coup had become a public demonstration of his own inadequacy. The contest is concluded, the Empress announced. Prince Valdris, you agreed to submit to my judgment if you lost. Do you honor that agreement? Valdris looked around the hall, seeing the faces of his former supporters, the alien ambassadors, the palace guards, who were now surrounding his mercenaries. His coup attempt was finished, and everyone knew it. I honor the agreement, he said quietly. Then I judge you guilty of treason, attempted murder, and endangering the stability of the empire, the Empress said. You will be stripped of rank and title. You will be exiled to the furthest system of our territory, where you will spend the remainder of your life in contemplation of your failures. Your supporters will be pardoned, as they were clearly misled by your ambitions. It was a masterful political solution. Valdris was neutralized without creating martyrs among his followers. The coup attempt was exposed as the work of one ambitious prince rather than a legitimate resistance movement, and the empire's reputation for justice was maintained in front of foreign observers. As the guards led Valdris away, the Empress turned to Marcus. Well done, human. Your solution was both elegant and effective. Thank you, Your Majesty. However, she continued, and Marcus felt his heart sink, your actions tonight have created a new problem. Your Majesty, you have just demonstrated, in front of representatives from across the galaxy, that a human servant possesses political and strategic abilities that exceed those of a Zephyrian prince. This will have implications. Marcus began to understand what she was getting at. People will wonder why a human with such abilities is serving as a personal attendant. Indeed. Which means your current position is no longer tenable. The Empress paused, studying his face. I must ask you directly. Marcus Chen, have you given thought to what you want your future to hold? It was a loaded question, and Marcus knew it. His answer would determine not just his own fate, but possibly the future of human-Zephyrian relations. I want to serve, he said finally. Not because of blood debt or legal obligation, but because I believe in what we could accomplish together. Your people have incredible knowledge and technology. My people have different perspectives and experiences. Together, We could solve problems that neither could handle alone. The Empress was quiet for a long moment. You wish to remain in Imperial service voluntarily? Yes, Your Majesty, but not as a personal attendant, as whatever you think I can do most good as. I see. She turned to address the assembled crowd. Citizens and honored guests, witness this moment. Marcus Chen of Earth, bound to our family through blood debt, has served with distinction and honor. His actions have preserved the Empire and demonstrated the value of diverse perspectives in governance. She paused, and Marcus could feel the weight of history settling around them. Therefore, by my imperial authority, I hereby declare the blood debt discharged through exceptional service. Marcus Chen, you are free to return to your former life if you choose. The crowd murmured in surprise. Blood debts were never discharged early. This was unprecedented. However, the Empress continued, the Empire has need of advisors who can think beyond traditional boundaries. Marcus Chen, I offer you a position as Special Advisor for External Relations, with full authority to develop new approaches to the challenges facing our outer territories. Do you accept? Marcus felt a smile spread across his face. I accept, Your Majesty. Then let it be recorded that the human Marcus Chen has chosen freely to serve the Zephyrian Empire, not as property or debtor, but as a valued counselor and friend to the crown. The crowd erupted in cheers, but Marcus barely heard them. He was looking at Princess Lirelei, who had appeared at her mother's side during the ceremony. She was smiling at him, and there was something in her expression that suggested his future held more complications than just his new job. One more thing, the Empress said quietly, for his ears alone. Your new position comes with certain privileges, including the right to court members of the royal family, should you be so inclined. Marcus felt his face heat up. Your Majesty, something to consider for the future, she said with amusement. For now, concentrate on solving our immediate problems. There will be time for personal matters later. As the crowd began to disperse and palace staff moved to clean up the aftermath of the failed coup, Marcus found himself standing in the Hall of Stars with a future he'd never imagined. He was no longer a prisoner of debt, no longer a curiosity or an experiment. He was a valued member of an interstellar civilization, with the chance to bridge the gap between two very different species. So, Princess Lirelei said, approaching him with that enigmatic smile, how does it feel to be free? Terrifying, Marcus admitted, but also, right. Like this is where I'm supposed to be. Good, she said. Because now comes the hard part. Actually solving all the problems you claimed you could fix. Marcus laughed, feeling lighter than he had since this whole adventure began. One problem at a time, Your Highness. One problem at a time. Outside the palace walls, the three suns were setting in a display of colors no human artist had ever imagined. Marcus Chen, former cargo hauler, current special advisor to the Zephyrian Empire, and possible future prince consort, stood watching the sunset and thinking about the journey that had brought him here. He'd shed blood for an alien princess, been claimed by an alien queen, and had ultimately won his freedom by proving that sometimes the best solutions come from the most unexpected sources. His new position would bring new challenges, new dangers, and new opportunities to make a difference on a galactic scale. But for now, standing in a crystal palace on an alien world, with a beautiful princess at his side, and a job that might actually let him change the galaxy for the better, Marcus Chen was exactly where he wanted to be. The blood debt had been paid in full, but the real adventure was just beginning.